Welcome to the Canon Creative Studio here at the Sundance Film Institute and the Behind the Lens panel series in cooperation with American Cinematographer magazine. My name is Jay Holben. I am a director and producer in Los Angeles. I am also an associate member of the American Society of Cinematographers, and I am the contributing technical editor for American Cinematographer magazine. Do you want the rest of my bio? I can keep going for a little while. It's my honor to host this panel here today with these three extraordinary filmmakers. And I have immediately to my left Ms. Laura Hudock, and Mr. Christopher LaMarca, and Mr. Brad Garrison. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Okay, you guys can give him something warm on that. Jeez.
God, we're that bad.
Okay, that was a little better. Laura, your film at the festival here is Girls State. Tell us a little bit about that.
Is this on? Okay. Girls State is about 500 teenage girls that come together at Missouri Girls State to form a mock government, running for office, forming Supreme Court, and debating the issues of the day. And we basically had 6 main characters and 6 DPs, and we were each assigned to a character, and we're doing intense verite for the entire time. And the character I followed was Emily, if you've seen the film.
In intense verite, you're talking almost 24/7 for
like
10
14
days?
hours a day, yeah. A marathon. It was a marathon. It was like, you know, you're just, also my character, who's fantastic, was also the Energizer Bunny of the group, so I was literally running after her, running backwards, like following her everywhere, and that's really tiring for nonstop, camera on your shoulder, being hyper-focused, and we just had a production room that occasionally we'd go back and collapse on the floor, or have someone cover us for a minute to get some food and go back out, yeah.
It's kind of an interesting subject to have a relief team of sorts so that you can get a break, right? Is that one of the other 6 DPs, or is that somebody specifically?
No, actually had another ACDP that, and then also sometimes a character's having downtime and there's another DP that's available, you know, but it was rare. Or sometimes you just not follow your character for half an hour and pray that you don't miss anything. And sometimes there's a lot of crossover because characters some of them were friends, so it was like, okay, Emily's with Maddie, and I know that Aaron's on that scene, so I can go have some lunch, you know, so like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Christopher, tell us a little bit about the great hysterical family comedy of Sugarcane.
There's a comedian in the audience, or leading the panel, I should say. I was a DP on a film called Sugarcane. We premiered yesterday, and it's about a search for missing children at a residential school up in BC, up in Canada, and it took place over the course of 2 years. It was a verite film.
It's a lot heavier than that. Looking at, to give a little context to it, because I knew nothing about this subject at all, Catholic-run government schools for indigenous individuals that were forced into these schools.
Yeah, so basically, you know, the Canadian government and the Catholic Church started these, what they're called residential schools. This is starting in the late 1800s. The last one closed in 1997. What they were doing was they're forcibly removing Native kids from their families and putting them in these schools to get the Indian out of them. And over the course of these years, these kids were disappearing and they weren't coming home, and no one really talked about it. There were some investigations, no one really knew, and there was a lot of shame around it, so it was never really shared widely. So this film is the first time in history that this has been shown out in the public outside of these reserves, and for any of all the other places where these schools were. I mean, there was hundreds of them. So this is really the first this is the first medium, if you will, that has shown and digging into this reality that no one has known for a really, really long time. And it is like the darkest as it gets, because it involves a lot of sexual abuse with children, and literally taking them away from their families and then them never coming home. So it is very dark subject matter, but I will say that the beauty of the film is that you're immersed with the characters on this journey through the search for these children and also along their healing journey. And that's definitely what you experience when you watch the film. Like, you really feel the resiliency and you feel the strength that it takes to step up into one of the most horrific things known to man. And that was the way that we wanted to tell this story from that place, from a place of having the strength, having the resilience to really face something that no one would ever want to face for their whole lives. And we're really, really proud of the film and really proud of the people for stepping up the way that they did and opening themselves up and being really, really extremely vulnerable. It was a huge gift to make the film and to be trusted in that way.
Yeah, and a beautiful story of multi-generational healing from a very personal aspect, from horrible atrocities that were happening for almost a century. I mean, it almost makes you feel guilty for not being aware of what was happening.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, no one knew, right? I mean, that was the whole crazy thing of this. Like, how could this have been happening? This is a modern-day genocide. How is this happening and no one knew about it? And it's astounding, right? And that's obviously something that needs to be reckoned with. And the other thing that, Jay is referring to is that you are watching intergenerational trauma heal in real time on camera, because it's not just something that happened in the late 1800s or the early 1900s. It's still affecting families today because of the shame. And along with that abuse came a lot of alcoholism, and that divides families. And so you really understand the layers of how this type of experience will affect literally generations of family. And to be a part of that and to see that kind of healing, it's really inspiring. It really, really is, because if people can heal from something like that, like, it really kind of does give you faith in humanity. Because like I said, it's the darkest of the dark, and to step up into that is very inspiring.
And on a little lighter fare, Bradley, your film is making the festival rounds right now, and you shot a film called Chasing Amy.
That is correct. It's not playing here, unfortunately, but it is touring around the country. Our film it's a love story. You get to see the director and then his wife, their relationship, examined kind of through the medium that is Chasing Amy. And, over the course of 90 minutes, you really get to know these people and these characters, and you really, really fall in love with them. And there's laughter, there's tears. You get a little bit of everything in there.
And this is, for you to be here at the perfect festival for it, where Chasing Amy was kind of born, doing a little guerrilla marketing for it. Or did you getting some good response from people?
Yeah, we have, we have branded hats that we were wearing all over the place, and people are like, "Oh, I've seen the original Chasing Amy. Haven't seen that one. I'm looking forward to it." So we're driving up buzz and getting people talking, which is great.
So anybody who might know me knows that I'm a super nerd, so I want to start talking some technical stuff. Bear with me. But let's talk about what you use to shoot with camera and lens selection.
Yeah, so we used the C300 Mark II. We were lucky enough to get a grant with Canon that they provided those, along with the 30-105 zoom and the 24 and the 50 CNE primes.
Christopher, what about you?
We shot on the C500 Mark II. We were a two-camera shoot. Emily Cassie, who's also director, she shot alongside of me. She was also a cinematographer on the film. And she used a C300 Mark II, and we shot those simultaneously throughout production. Should I keep going?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
You look like you're afraid to do that. No, stick with the technical right now. We'll get to
I will say that this film wouldn't have been possible, actually, without the C500 Mark II. So besides the things that everyone loves about that camera, which is obviously the sensor and the full frame, it looks beautiful. The way it captures low light and the images that it brings forth is astounding. But I think, like, for me, which is like best secret about the camera is the fact that you can run 4 channels of audio on it with the expansion unit. And I was running all of the audio for this film, so I was running 3 wires and then a shotgun on the camera, and because we didn't have a dedicated sound person. And that was a choice of ours because of the sensitivity of the nature and having as less little people as around as possible. And the camera was flawless in that way. And I I had a whole meeting with R&D folks about it, and I had like very little to add, honestly, to change it. It was literally it was a dream camera for this type of production.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Laura, how about-
I was not paid to say that, by the way.
you're a plant.
We primarily shot with the Canon C500 Mark II. We also had a couple C70s on gimbals, which I personally didn't utilize. I prefer handheld on the shoulder, using my body, sort of way to go. And Canon Cinema Primes. The majority of the film, I would say, was shot on a 50 mil across all cameras. I also had a 35 that I used a little bit at the beginning and end. But we decided collectively to stick pretty much with the 50 mils so that we could have some sort of consistency between the cameras. And also for some of the stage shots, like the 70 to 200. And we specifically also chose the 50 because on Boys State, which this is the follow-up, sort of, well, it's called Sister Doc to Boys State. I wasn't on that film, but they did use like a wider prime, and I felt like that we should maybe go tighter on this film just to create a bit more intimacy and intensity from the compression of the lens. But it's very challenging to pull nonstop verite focus on a 50 mil full frame, I gotta say. But it was still worth it, but it's an extra challenge you're adding.
Yeah, because you're pulling your own. You don't have an AC.
Yeah, I was pulling my own focus.
Yeah. So there's an interesting philosophical aspect of that, because whenever I shot verite, I always wanted to zoom, because I wanted the control to be able to stay where I was and change the composition. But you're forcing yourself to get more physically intimate and move around with the talent and making it harder on yourself with the prime. But talk about that decision.
Well, in one way it's easier, in one way it's harder. A cine zoom full day, I mean, that's exhausting. A prime, I mean, we wanted to create like a smaller a small footprint, a lightweight, as much package as possible. So a prime makes sense. And, sometimes we're in dorm rooms and small, tight situations, so a prime makes more sense. But yeah, I kind of like the challenge of having to change frame size with my own body, and really what it comes down to is finding connection with and trust from your subject that allows you to be like, I'm going to come in and get that close up, and sometimes it takes a day or two to get there. But luckily I was able to connect pretty quickly with Emily, and we bonded, and she trusted me, and she let me in her world. And because of that generosity, I feel like I was able to tell her story well. I think, and primes are always a better quality image usually, so.
I want to latch onto that idea because, Christopher, we kind of talked about this a little bit in our pre-interview. The idea of gaining the relationship with the subject, gaining the intimacy and the trust with the subject, and especially in such a sensitive subject as yours. How do you go about that, and how do you go about invading their world in a literal sense as yourself as the camera?
I mean, I can answer. I think there's probably 1,000 different answers to that question, because the first answer, I think, just really starts with being a human being and being a person. And before your camera is even there, and before you're even there to start filmmaking, is just being in the presence of someone and feeling them as if you were not making a film. And all of that kind of interaction and trust building, the same way that you meet someone on the street, is huge. If you walk into a situation with a camera on your shoulder and with a big zoom on it, like anyone else, it's invasive, it's intimidating, And it also kind of says something about you, which might not even be true to who you are, but in that moment, you're coming across as aggressive and maybe not fully aware of where you are in the space, because you're coming in with the feeling that you want to take something instead of receive something. So I think that those initial experiences and the time that you're spending with subjects is often best with no camera. So for me, I don't bring my camera out for a while, because I need to see if people just feel comfortable just being around me. And if I'm not feeling like I'm being invited just as a person like this, then that's telling me a lot, even more than their words. Because sometimes someone's like, oh yeah, you know, this is a great idea, I'm up for this film, I'm doing this thing. And then you're in their presence, and then they're looking down, their shoulder is being turned away. And so they can verbally be giving you access or consenting, but their whole energetics is telling a different story. And that is the point and the awareness that you need to go into the next step if you're really going to engage with humanity on a humanistic level, not just see someone as a character.
Yeah, everything, everyone and everything is energy, right? And we can sense each other's. I can sense if you're pissed. I can sense if you want to invite me into your world. And you just have to have presence and sensitivity to where they're at and how they're feeling. And it's definitely helpful to have maybe a couple days of pre-filming, which I got a bit of, that to just sort of get them comfortable with you in their space. Definitely, I'm not just there with the camera on my shoulder and I'm just not engaged. Like, I'll put the camera down, I'll chat, connect, you know, and then maybe if they start saying something, I'll pick it up again. But like, they're not, the energy that they're allowing to be shown has so much to do with the energy that you are putting out, and how receptive you are, and how non-judgmental you can be. Sort of let them sort of feel that. They can feel it. They can feel you. So it's, yeah.
Bradley, in your case, the director is the subject, right? So you have a bit of a different relationship with your subject in that sense.
Yeah, it's not going in cold, kind of like you guys. We had known each other for years before we even started this project. And so I didn't really have the issue of getting, having trust, having to gain the trust. I kind of already had it. But, derail my train of thought real quick.
That was terrifying. I don't know what the hell that was.
But it's different in another way, because just think about how many very intimate moments that you've kind of had to be voyeuristic with your friends. It probably doesn't happen very often. And so you kind of walk out knowing more about your friend than you do anybody else. And it kind of, it can change the dynamic and the nature of the relationship. Luckily, that didn't happen with us. It kind of made us stronger. But, kind of being in their house while, they're dealing with some stuff and, having some troubles like that, it feels weird, I guess. I'm not supposed to be there, but I have to get this for the sake of the movie. So it has a different set of challenges. But at the end of the day, if you, are honest with yourself and with your subject, then you can easily come out stronger, better friends on the other side. So
I've never directed a doc where I was the subject, but I can't imagine being in a fight with my spouse and being aware of, oh, okay, he's got the camera over there. Okay, this is a great moment. Okay, no, I'm going to give a zinger right now. Do you feel like there's an extra awareness when your subject is the director?
Yeah, we were lucky that our director is very intentional and very specific about the things that he wanted. So I kind of had an understanding that that look means that this is probably off limits, even if it's great. It didn't happen very often, but there were a couple times. But to tell a story. At the very beginning of the process, he didn't. The original intent of the film was not for him to be in it at all. We show up to the first interview in LA, and we only had 2 cameras on our interview subject. And at the end of that, I had to walk over to him, and I was like, hey, we need to put a 3rd camera on you. And I got so much pushback, like, oh, I don't want to be in it, I don't want to be in it. But I was like, look, like, these interviews are like conversational. They're very flowy. It's not like I ask you a question, I sit and I wait for the answer, and then I ask the next question. Like, there's a conversation happening, and we need to capture that. And so after a little bit of back and forth, it was like, okay, fine, we'll put a 3rd camera on there. And from there, it's kind of like, okay, well, now you're a part of this. You are part of the story. So, welcome to the documentary, I guess.
Laura, for you, you're running a 2-person team. So in a sense, you are field producer and director and cinematographer. I just want to talk about that for a minute, just having that, making those decisions, following the narrative, deciding what moments to cover and not to cover, and how you do that over the course of 10 days.
Oh, wow. I mean, overall, to make the film, it was a large team, but the filming itself was very intimate, just me and sound. Gosh, I think, I mean, while I'm filming, I'm definitely editing in my head. I'm thinking, okay, I'm building tension while she's typing up this, report, and I'm gonna get the close-up of this and the close-up of that, and then cut to the, why. So I think I'm thinking of all the shots that would be needed to build the scene in my mind as I'm going. Otherwise, I'm just being super present to just whatever is unfolding before me, because you don't know what's going to happen, who they're going to run into. It's being present. It's being editing in your head. It's instinct. I don't know. I think it's just an instinct I've built up over so many years of having to do that. I don't know how to explain.
Have you done editing yourself before?
Not really. I've edited my own reels and stuff, but no, I just, I don't know. It's just part of the skill set that you need to have as a documentary cinematographer is also being able to edit in your head. Like, do I have what it takes for the editor to cut a scene together from this footage?
Christopher, thoughts on that?
Yeah, we could have a whole panel just on that. I think just to build off of what Laura was saying is, I mean, first and foremost, you have to have the ability and the trust to completely embrace chaos. And because it's within that chaos that the magic is happening when you're shooting verite, when you're making documentaries in that way. And to embrace that chaos, you need to be able to be comfortable doing all of these things in the moment, which oftentimes is directing and is producing, and it's also sometimes it's being a social worker, and sometimes it's being a sound person. And if you don't have all of that, and you're filming something for a week or a month or a year, and that moment happens, and you're not there close enough, or you don't have the right lens on, or your highlights are completely clipped, you'll be depressed for a couple of years. And that stuff eats you up. And I mean, I'm making fun of it, but I'm also being really serious. This type of filmmaking that Laura and I are talking about, it's very immediate, and there's no reverse. There's no saying cut. Let's do this again. Again, when things are happening for people in real time, and it could be some of the biggest moments in their life. You either catch it or you don't, and there's no faking that. And it's a scary line to know, but when you can be there and be present and step up into it, it's a really beautiful place to be, because you have to be so present. You have to be so open. You have to be in such a place of channeling, and that's just a beautiful way to be as a person in general. And to make art from that space is a huge, huge gift.
Also, to add, from just being in the present moment, it's also having an idea of the bigger picture at the same time. My character had a very interesting story arc, and I was very aware of her arc and what was happening and the progression of the arc and how that might come across in the film. So having the bigger picture as well as the micro and the macro, you know.
Yeah, you kind of said you have to be a social worker too, but you also have to be a little bit of a psychiatrist to be able to read people and understand people and see where they're going before they realize where they're going, right?
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes talk to you about advice or this or that. I mean, I don't try to influence their direction, but there's a connection between you that's, I mean, especially a situation like this that's so tight, that you're definitely a psychiatrist in some way, both analyzing and also just sometimes a supportive presence. But that's also, being a supportive presence allows them to relax and trust you to film their intimate moments.
Brad, that has to kind of go double for you because you already have a friendship and a relationship with your subject, right?
Yeah, especially, being the psychiatrist part, where it's like, oh my God, our director is always worried about how he'll come off, whether it's authentic or not, and, not trying to overly direct himself in order, like, for it to appear that it's, like, obviously fake, so I'm just like, no, you just gotta relax and be yourself, like, pretend that I'm not here, and, like, we just gotta keep doing what you're doing, like, but don't, try not to get into your own head, which, when you are a director and the subject, is pretty easy to do because who else is going to tell you no, right? Like, but it's knowing your subject definitely helps a lot because then you don't have to worry about like overly directing them. You can just that look with your eyes is usually enough to like calm them down or amp them up, whether depending on what you need from them. So,
Christopher, you said something in our earlier conversation that really resonated with me, and talking about documentaries are kind of going soft in the modern day. And I want to kind of open up the world to that and some of your thoughts on what that means and what this film that you just did means to you.
What was the last part of your question?
What this film means to you, what you just did.
Documentaries going soft. Here we go. I think regardless of the type of documentary you make, there's lots of ways to make documentary films. They can be interview-driven, they can be verite, they can be hybrid films, whatever it is. There's a million ways to do it. And I think the most important thing in that process is that there's genuine risk-taking within the medium. And a lot of that risk-taking, again, can be in any of those genres. And really what I mean is that the beautiful thing about documentary is taking risks. And a lot of the times, what it takes to take risks is that you need a lot of time. And you can't fake time with people. And you can't put yourself in a situation trying to necessarily pretend something is happening when it's not. And I think because of what's been happening with the marketplace and the desire for documentary, which has become just been more demand for it in the last couple of years, the types of films that I think that are being chosen are lending themselves more towards things that are softer, just kind of like more stories about famous people, musicians, these types of things that people can just drop into, they can watch it, there's not a big risk involved, things are kind of written out, and people can go on the journey, and it's more of entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with that. I love all those films. I watch all those films. But getting back to what I was saying earlier, if we're losing the element of risk when we're making documentary films, we're losing the most important and powerful part of the genre.
Deep breath, I saw that.
I mean, what it comes down to is money. What it comes down to is streamers or companies that do not want to take risks on funding political or social documentaries. They want something with that's commercial, something with a rock star. And these are fun docs, but as artists, as filmmakers, documentaries are so important to have a reflection of our humanity, to have a reflection of who we are in this world, to have a voice. And and basically, our voice is getting shut down. I mean, I'm hearing from a number of producers and directors that have, 12 films they're trying to like pitch, and like the one like easy softball thing is what they're getting, but the one that they really want to make and care about isn't getting picked up, or getting money, or getting bought if it's been made. And we need more companies and streamers that aren't afraid to say something and aren't afraid to, piss somebody off. We need more space to have our voice, basically.
I think documentaries should make people uncomfortable. And in today's climate of we want you to sit and binge watch as much stuff as we can throw at you, making people uncomfortable kind of turns them off to doing so. So we give them softball docs that are easy to consume over 8 hours instead of 90 minutes that don't really challenge anybody's worldview. And I think that we need more of those. We need more things that make people uncomfortable for 90 minutes, and then they can go watch Friends or whatever. But people need to be challenged more from the stuff that they consume.
And media is the most powerful way to combat social injustice. Like, it's necessary. It is a necessary part of our culture and our society. And we need to fight for it more.
And I think it's a really clear sign that I think that a lot of the powers that be they're underestimating the audience's ability to experience this medium in a myriad of different ways, And what we're seeing is from a standpoint of the structure of a lot of the documentaries, whether films or series, that they're structurally all starting to feel the same. The pacing is very similar. The way that the information is being resolved in terms of exposition and what they think the viewer needs to know to make it through it is I feel like it's kind of flatlining and making things a lot more linear than people really want them to be. I think that people want to be challenged. They want to feel when they're watching something that they're a part of an exploration, and they want to insert themselves into it. And I feel like when we lose that ability and connection to the viewer, we're doing documentary a huge disservice.
All of your docs are verite style, more or less. How much do you know going in what your story is going to be? And how much are you just a bucket gathering everything and allowing the story to evolve in post?
Oh, is it working? Okay. I basically knew my character's backstory. I knew she was conservative. I knew her beliefs. I knew that she was probably going to run for governor, but that's about it. Everything else sort of unfolds in front of you, and there were a lot of surprises, and her character arc had a real surprise in it. That was part of the big strength of the film, actually. So I think most of it you're just discovering as you go, but you have a backstory in mind of like how they might deal with situations or what their personality might be like in certain situations. But everything is in verite is as you go. Yeah.
Yeah, we had the way our film began was just with the access that we had to the bands, to the reservation that was near the school. And once we had secured that access, it was just like, okay, here we go. We didn't know who our main characters were going to be from day one. And that's the process of exploration that begins that is super, super important. And that's like what I was speaking to earlier, where it's like, yeah, okay, we have the access, but like the cameras are down for days or in a week at a time. And we're just there and making our presence known and talking to people and be like, okay, we have the access, but do people really want us here? Like, what's the vibe? Like, this is what's really happening here, like energetically, with no words. What's the body language of the room? What is this? What's the body language of the person next to me? Like, do they want us here to make this film? And during that process, it becomes a dance, and some people will come forward naturally, and we start filming with them. And then will that person become a main character in the film? Maybe, maybe not. And through that exploration and trust and just being genuinely curious and open, it starts to create and evolve, and it naturally will present itself. Those characters will come out because the alignment and the timing will just happen. And again, that's the magic of documentary. That's the exploration. That's the most incredible part about it.
Being open to magic.
And we're done.
For ours, it originally was going to be mostly interview-driven, almost entirely interview-driven. It was supposed to be just like a cultural look back on the film and its legacy 20-plus years later. But as we started putting cameras on our director, things started to change, and then, in 2020, early 2020, we did an interview. We sat down with him and his wife, and then we're like, oh, this is the story. This is what we should be focusing on. And that kind of drove what we did after that to it being more verite style with them two, and how the story of the film Chasing Amy kind of mirrors his life and the things that were going on, and it becomes like they get tied together as a through line through the rest of the film.
All right, I'm going to swing it back around to being nerdy again. You talked about your rig when you're dealing with handheld. Small stabilizers are the thing, but yeah, that's what I want to talk about real quick. But you went back to a more shoulder-mounted, which personally for me was always better. I get fatigued with something in my paws.
Well, also a big part of it is I like my eye on the viewfinder. I don't like to operate from a monitor. I feel like it distances me from what I'm filming. I feel like when my eye is on the viewfinder and through the lens, I feel more connected to what I'm filming. So that's a huge part of it. And then the other part of it is like, I very much use my body. I'm a big yogi for like over 20 years, so I get in all sorts of bizarre positions and movements to like get that. And I basically operate with on my shoulder with knee pads, and sometimes I'm around on the ground, sometimes I'm on, but I sort of contort myself in different ways to sort of get the shot or like wrap around or something. It's like very much like it's a whole mind, body, like I'm completely in it. Yeah. So if I'm holding a thing, I feel disconnected, which I think creates a more disconnected image.
Fair enough. Chris?
Yeah, I'm very similar to Laura on that. Easy rig is like my least favorite thing on the planet. And same with gimbals. It's, I think elemental is a good word to talk about it. Like shooting for me is such an elemental thing, and having the camera on my body helps me gauge how people are feeling in front of it for me. And when I can move with the camera, and as I can get closer or farther away, I feel like that's really given me the closest read to the things that are happening around me. When I'm using a stabilizer, and when the camera's away from me, I feel like it becomes a wall for me in front of what's happening. And that to me is like the exact opposite of what I'm trying to create. And these are all personal things. And I think also, like, on top of that, it's important for me that which is different between what Laura's talking about. So I shoot from the hip. So I come from a photography background, and I used to shoot with a Hasselblad camera, and that's a waist level viewfinder. So for me, I have my camera rigged where it's on my hip and I shoot on a monitor. And so it's important for me that I feel open and connected with something to people without having something in front of my face, so I shoot with a monitor. But energetically, we're accessing and coming from the same place, which is super cool. So that to me, again, is also the reason, why I shoot specifically that way, because I'm more interested in what the person's body language is telling me than what the words that they're telling me. So my personal system is built around my ability to feel the area, the space, the humanity around me, and then that dictates how I operate the camera.
But the stabilizer can still be a good tool. For me personally, I like to use it for like specific shots rather than to cover a scene.
Yeah. Of course, that's a great point. These are all specific tools with certain things, but I was referring to that when I think about operating a camera. For me, it's not like, oh, my camera then goes on my easy rig or it just goes on the stabilizer. It first starts with my body, and then if I need to accentuate that in a way, then we'll get the right tool for it. But in terms of my connection to the camera and this medium and being in the world, it's 100% handheld and with the camera touching my body. And that informs the way that I shoot.
Do you use a hip shot or anything when you're shooting from the hip? Anything to?
I have this kind of like it's this old Zacuto barrel thing that they used to have. Like when they came out with it, they usually kind of put it here, and I have it where so it just comes out here. So I hold it and just kind of balance it. I balance it on my hip like this, and that's kind of like
Goes into your belt or something, right?
No, it doesn't clip onto me at all. Because I similar to Laura, it's like I'm all over with the camera. Like I'll move my camera up to my shoulder when I feel like I want to be connected on someone's eye level like that, and then I'll come down to the ground and I'll sweep with a person's feet and I'll move to the hands, and all of that range is super important to me. And the only way you get that range is when you are fully handheld. And also weight is important. So like I like the weight of my camera. Like a C70 would be way too light for me. So the C500 Mark II, and the way that I have it, it kind of makes it's its own natural stabilizer. So I use the weight to my advantage instead of trying to take it away.
Bradley, any thoughts?
I come from corporate world, so like first thought is gimbal. But in the first couple of shooting days, I was talking with the other DP on the film, Bill Winters, who kind of gave me some tips about like emotion and how like the gimbal is too smooth sometimes to convey emotion when something is going on. So from then on, when it comes to like doc stuff, it's on the shoulder. And then occasionally from the hip, I don't have a fancy thing that goes into my hip, so it's just cradling it kind of like a baby. But I'm more open to like the handheld stuff, and honestly, I feel like it's better for my back to put it on my shoulder than to carry it out in front of me. So,
Hell yeah. One more thing before we open it up for questions. I want to talk about the idea of working in documentaries as a path to another medium, like working in narratives or something else. That the doc world might be more open to new people coming in than features or television are. And yeah, I'm looking right at you.
Yeah. Oh, well, you know my story. Well, I wasn't intending to get into docs from the beginning. I came up as a camera assistant in the early 2000s on narrative film and television. And just at that time, as a woman in the industry, there was not a path forward in the camera department. There was maybe 2 DPs, Ellen Kurz, Nancy Shriver in New York, no female camera operators, and there was just, we were living in a different world. It was a collective unconscious bias that women weren't DPs or operators. That was like bizarro, and that's been changing now, and I basically didn't want to AC for the rest of my life, and I produced and shot a feature doc on my own, and that helped me start to get some doc work, and documentaries were the only place as a woman that I could get an opportunity at that particular time. So I worked my way up, shooting bigger and bigger docs that sort of got recognition. And then eventually I reached out to some of my contacts when I was an AC operators that were now DPs and were like, all right, let me operate. I mean, I've filmed in the Congo, I've climbed a mountain in Afghanistan, I've run from the Taliban. I think I can handle a narrative film set. Thank you very much. So I started getting opportunities day playing as an operator, and then finally got like full-time positions on on narrative TV shows like City on a Hill and Westworld, and then finally now I'm getting DP opportunities in the narrative world. But it's been a long, epic journey, and I've made it very abbreviated, but it's been a long journey to get to this point. But now I am grateful that I have the ability to go between both a documentary and a narrative career, and I feel like now I'm a better narrative DP because of documentaries. My eye for natural light is so tuned and in a different way. My ability to shoot handheld, my ability to edit in my mind, my ability to hone in my instincts and be present and actually connect to what's unfolding in front of me, because like if you're not connecting to what you're filming, it's just like it's not going to reach the audience. And like so much of it is connection, and I bring that connection to a narrative scene as well. So documentary is definitely a great place to hone your skills, for sure.
Bradley, for you, if I remember correctly, this is your first feature, right?
That is correct.
So can you speak to the fact of kind of transitioning into something else by utilizing documentary?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in LA, so I come from the land of DPs aplenty. Like, you could throw a stone and hit one. And so I did more corporate stuff. I would shoot events for like the University of Southern California and do stuff like that. And then I kind of got burnt out a little bit, and I said, I got to get away from this place. And I ended up in in the heartland in Kansas City, and that's where I met Saf at the University of Kansas. And when he pitched me this film, I was like, okay. I mean, I've done interviews, I've done events. Like, I think I can do this. And I think I was one of the first ones that he pitched it to, and I was like, hell yeah, let's do it. I'm on board. And so now it's trying to leverage this into more opportunities. I think once people have more of an opportunity to be able to go and see the film and see what it is that I can do, then I can really lean on it full force and say, hey, look, if you like this, I can do this. I did this. So for me now, I am doing more post work, but I'm definitely looking to leverage into more DP stuff.
So if anybody's hiring. He's the best! Woo! Nice. I love the love. Christopher, before I open up the question, do you have any thoughts on that? I don't want to.
No, we can move on.
Okay, great,
Doing great.
wonderful, stunning. So now the pressure is on all of you. If you have any questions for any of the panel, right, I love it immediately. Thank you.
My comment. This has been my favorite part of the whole Sundance. My first Sundance, so it's been amazing. You guys are great. My question is specifically for Chris, but for everyone as well. When you're dealing with difficult subject matters, I'm wondering how you go about deciding what to film and what not to film, because I was at another film festival and we talked about, again, there's a lot of people who are in documentary that aren't journalists, and I come from a journalistic background, and so it's the respect you have for your subject, which is at the end of the day is the most important thing. And I'm just wondering how you go about walking that balance between respectful, getting what you need, and then obviously the other end, which is the sensational stuff that people will film, and we have some of that now. But I'm just wondering, anybody can talk about it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the art form right there. that is a constant line that moves. I think as I've grown as a filmmaker, as I've continued to spend and figure out and learn and spend more time with people, there's definitely no one-line answer for that. I will bring it back to one of the first things I've said of being here, which is like, first and foremost, it's about being a human being first. And if you know who you are as a human, and you come forward with that energy, and you come forward as being secure, that's where that's where those decisions need to be made, because that's what people are feeling from you. So it's not so much of like, should I go in with the camera now or should I pull back? It's like how you've been with that person for a year, for a minute, for a second, and then in that moment, you need to make a decisive decision. And sometimes you push too far, and sometimes you don't push enough. And I think being able to put yourself in those situations enough, that's how you find out how your own specific voice as a filmmaker will kind of come to be. But I think the key there is taking the risks to put yourselves into that spot where you have to be like, okay, this is the moment. Am I pushing too far or am I not pushing enough? And that's where the magic happens in this medium.
I gotta say, one of the hardest stories I've ever had to film was rape as a weapon of war in the Congo, where I'm filming both perpetrators and rape survivors who were quite brutally affected. So it's extremely sensitive, especially shooting with survivors, that you want to be super sensitive to what they're comfortable with sharing. But also at the same time, I want them to have a voice and I want their story told. I think one of the hardest scenes I ever had to film was I was in a doctor's office with a 6-year-old girl that had been raped. And I'm trying to empower her and share her story so that this can be stopped, but also protect her identity. Basically the frame that communicated that was both protecting her and telling the story was like, she's being examined behind the doctor with the curtain, and you just see her little feet in the stirrup, and it's just like so hard and so heartbreaking. So it was like trying to find that balance of communicating her story and protecting her at the same time.
Good God, I don't know how to follow anything with that. Bridal, any thoughts?
Can I just say one quick thing to that? I think that really, like, just to take it a step further, what Laura is talking about, it's like these are the moments that we can't be afraid of and that are so important. Like this is, and that's the thing. Like as filmmakers, like those are the lines. Like when we're creating art from that place, it doesn't rise any higher. So I want to really reiterate that. You know, it's really powerful and vulnerable and scary to do that. But like that's what we're here to do. And if there's one takeaway from this panel, and everyone to take that away, that message away.
Well, just to go off what you two were saying, it's all about empathy for the most part. Like there's a fine line between art and exploitation, and it's really hard to find. But if you go into what you're doing with the mindset of empathy, more often than not, you're going to be on the right side of that line.
Well, there's some sort of protest or religious sacrifice happening outside. Yes, please.
It's funny that this is being out. Perfect. My thing is how are we going to convince broadcasters to share these stories, because the person of color is so detrimental to our survival right now to tell these stories because of the insensitive. Like what is happening in Palestine, the same thing that's happening in Congo, and the same thing that's happening in Sudan. What has happened in Haiti? Like this is detrimental to my community, it's detrimental to the Muslim community. And the problem we have right now in Hollywood is the lack of women up top and the lack of people of color to make it. So how are we going to, it's almost like a horde. And as you guys are higher up, I'm curious to how the people who are recognized right now and the people who are up and coming like myself, the person that was just sitting with me, she just graduated courses. How are we going to be able to change this area? Because as I deprogram myself and I'm seeing these things and I want to shoot these things, nobody wants to air them, and that's problematic.
That is an excellent question. But how do we change the entire industry that's so messed up right now? I mean, in terms of like women and minorities, I mean, it's definitely, like I didn't have a mentor coming up. So you know, I meet young DPs that want to talk or want advice, I'm like, yeah, because God, I wish I had that. Or I try to hire more women or, you know, empower the next generation. In terms of what's being bought, God, I don't know. How do we change the big, how do we change corporations? How do we, I don't know.
So I should just say, I'm from my TV and film in Canada, so I work with marketing people, bring them up. I worked with years because I did dealt with the basic manager and staff, and so like I come from a very unique perspective. And from many sources, like I dealt with this my whole life, and the more I dive into this, the more I'm seeing that there is a big problem, like a massive problem. And I just got what they're going to schedule now out of Hollywood. And if you remember what happened after post 9/11, that is what they're asking for again. So like for me, I'm scared. I'm extremely scared because we're at a crossroads. And I'm trying to figure out being here and seeing what's out there, what's happening, with conversations I'm having. I am terrified of looking back.
We have gone backwards. I mean, like, yeah.
More back. Like I feel like we're sprinting backwards instead of just like take a step back, think about it.
I don't know. We need. Does anyone here work for any of the Amazon, Apple, Netflix? I mean, give us a voice, please. I mean, it's basically where the money is. That's going to help us get our work seen. I mean, I have a documentary, Invisible Nation, that's going to be closing Slamdance if you're still here, where I followed the president of Taiwan. And it follows U.S.-China-Taiwan relations. We have an authoritarian government that's threatening to invade a sitting democracy of 23 million innocent people on the verge of possible World War III. This is an important documentary. No one's buying it yet. This is like, the world is effed up, and we need these stories out there to create awareness, to create empathy, to create connection, so we're not living in our own little bubbles, disconnected, you know, and numbing ourselves. The world, basically, also the audience needs to be involved. We need to stop watching stuff that just numbs us and actually, you know, watch things that maybe make us change our minds and connect to humanity. A lot of it is just us as humans. We need to be wanting to connect and expand as individuals. And I don't know, maybe then corporations will follow. I don't know. But at the same time, nobody wants to piss off China. So who's going to buy that doc? I don't know. I hope there's a solution. You got a solution?
Well, amplifying the voices of the marginalized people, like the way that people are gassing up people on TikTok and the other social media platforms, like those, that kind of messaging and that kind of strategy does work. Things like, you know, changing the industry with the way you spend your money. Boycotts do work. It may take a while, but stuff like that does work. So like, if they're not buying stuff, then maybe, you know, we shouldn't either, or we shouldn't support the kind of people that won't acknowledge the kind of tragedies that are happening around the world, like in Palestine. So,
but I do have to say, Girl State is very empowering for women, and for that I'm proud. I'm really proud of the doc for that.
I would have to say you sound like exactly the voice that we need to be telling stories. Great, wonderful, fantastic. I look forward to that.
I'm here promoting out of Canada, so we can team up with like Canon, Adobe, and stuff like that to get more women in my job during editing. And it's just because they don't have the cycle. So we're working on it.
Great.
Yeah, that's where it starts, is just opportunities to learn. You know, there's plenty of people that want to do it, but and I feel like that's opened up more too, even just like area rental in New York. I've gotten to go in and practice with the crane and like check out we have like a women's like training there that we do through Local 600. So like that kind of stuff, these programs now that are making the next generation or empowering the current generation. It's important that, and Canon, it's, you're offering hey, I'm excited you're gonna offer a camera for my next documentary. But basically, that's what it comes down to is companies like that supporting voices.
And not being a shill for Canon, but they are extraordinarily supportive of all of this. So it's an amazing corporation for that. And on that note, we've hit our time, so thank you very much for the three of you being here. Thank you for this conversation. Yeah, you can hear that. This was great. And thank you all of you for being here. On behalf of American Cinematographer and Canon, everybody stay safe and enjoy the festival.
Thank you.